The vast darkness of space stretched endlessly around the Caraxi scout vessel. Inside the sleek, purple-hulled ship, Fleet Commander Vexilor stood tall, his forearms crossed behind his back as he stared at the main view screen. His scales shimmered under the soft blue lighting of the command center. "Commander, we've detected an unknown vessel at the edge of our territory," reported Navigator Zix, her thin fingers dancing across the control panel. "It appears to be moving at sublight speed, using a primitive propulsion system." Vexilor's inner eyelids blinked with interest. "Origin?" "Unknown, sir. Not matching any species in our database." The commander moved closer to the screen, studying the strange ship. It was bulky and angular, nothing like the elegant curves of Caraxi design. Metal plates covered its hull, with what appeared to be primitive weapon systems dotting its surface. "Run a standard scan protocol," Vexilor ordered. "Let's see what we're dealing with." Across the void of space aboard the USS Intrepid, Lieutenant Samantha Miller jolted upright at her sensor station. The young woman's eyes widened as readings flooded her screen. "Captain Wright," she called out, her voice steady despite her concern. "We're being scanned by an unknown vessel." Captain Daniel Wright turned from his conversation with his first officer. At 45, Wright had seen his share of first contacts, but something about Miller's tone put him on alert. "Details, Lieutenant?" "The scan is unlike anything I've seen before, sir. It's penetrating our outer systems with ease." Miller's fingers flew across her console. "It's getting through our standard blocks." Wright crossed the bridge quickly, the low hum of the ship's engines providing a steady background to the sudden tension. The bridge crew of 20 continued their duties, but everyone was listening. "Can you show me the vessel?" The main screen shifted to display a strange purple ship, elegant and smooth, hovering at the edge of their sensor range. "No match in our database," reported Communications Officer Lisa Bennett, a woman with short brown hair and steady hands. "Definitely not a known species." Wright nodded thoughtfully. "Send standard greetings on all frequencies. Let's be friendly." "Chief," Engineer Alan Fisher's voice suddenly crackled through the communication system. "Captain, we have a problem. The alien scan is triggering our defensive countermeasures." Wright's head snapped up. "Override it." "I can't, sir," Fisher replied, panic evident in his voice. "The system registered the scan as a Level 4 intrusion. The counterpulse has already activated." The Intrepid hummed as hidden systems came to life. Developed after humanity's costly war with the Drax Collective, these defensive systems were designed to protect against invasive scans that had once led to the deaths of thousands of crew members. Back on the Caraxi vessel, Tactical, Officer Mev suddenly jerked back from her station as if burned. "Commander, something's coming back through our scan beam." Vexilor uncrossed his arms. "Explain." The scan triggered some kind of response. "It's following our beam directly back to us." The commander moved swiftly to the tactical station. "Defensive shields." "They're not responding," Mev reported, her scales paling with fear. "Whatever they sent is bypassing our security protocols." The Caraxi ship's lights flickered as the human counterpulse surged through their systems. Display screens flashed with error messages in the flowing script of the Caraxi language. "Break the connection," Vexilor ordered. "I can't," Mev replied. "Our systems are locking up." On the Intrepid, Captain Wright was calling for an emergency communication link. "We need to tell them it's an automated response," he said urgently. "Bennett, can you establish contact?" "I'm trying, sir," Bennett replied. "They're not responding to standard hails." Science Officer Peter Ross looked up from his station. "Captain, I don't think they expected the counterpulse. Based on their reactions, they've never encountered our defensive technology before." Wright's face was grim. "And now they think we've attacked them." He turned to his first officer. "Commander Rodriguez, prepare a first contact protocol. We need to fix this before it escalates." In the silence of space between the two ships, an invisible battle was already underway. The Caraxi had scanned a human warship, instantly realizing their fatal mistake as their systems began to fail one by one. Alarms blared throughout the Caraxi vessel. Red emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the panicked faces of the crew. Fleet Commander Vexler gripped the edge of the command console as another system failed. "Status report," he demanded. "Life support stable, but primary power is failing," reported Engineer Trell, her voice shaking. "Whatever they sent through our scan beam is eating through our systems like acid." Vexler watched as screen after screen went dark. In all his years of service, he had never encountered anything like this. The Caraxi were known across 3 star systems for their superior scanning technology. It was their pride, their strength, and now it had become their weakness. "Send emergency signals to the fleet," Vexler ordered. "Tell them we've encountered a hostile species with unknown defensive capabilities." Across the void, aboard the USS Intrepid, Chief Engineer Alan Fisher raced through the corridors toward the bridge. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he pushed past crew members. The defensive counterpulse was never meant to be used this way. It was designed as a last resort, against the Drax, not as a first response to unknown species. He burst onto the bridge, breathing hard. "Captain, the counterpulse is still active. It's following their scan beam right back to the source." Captain Wright's face was grim. "Can you shut it down?" "I've tried," Fisher said, moving to an empty engineering station. "The system thinks we're under attack. It's locked everyone out." On the main screen, they could see the alien vessel now drifting slightly, its lights flickering. "What exactly is happening to them?" Wright asked. Science Officer Peter Ross looked up from his readings. "The counterpulse is essentially a directed electromagnetic surge that follows any invasive scan back to its origin. It's designed to temporarily disable enemy systems." "Temporarily?" Wright asked. Ross nodded. "That's the problem. It was calibrated for Drax technology. We have no idea how it's affecting their systems." Lieutenant Samantha Miller spoke up from her sensor station. "Sir, I'm detecting power fluctuations from the alien vessel. Their shields are completely down." Wright turned to Communications Officer Lisa Bennett. "Any response to our hails?" "Nothing, sir," Bennett replied. "But I am picking up what might be distress signals. They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies." Security Chief Karen Grant stepped forward. "Captain, we should prepare for possible retaliation. If they have nearby allies—" "I agree," Wright interrupted. "Battle stations. But no offensive measures unless I give the order." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, defensive shields raised to maximum. Weapon systems brought online but not powered. Back on the Caraxi ship, Fleet Commander Vexler watched as his tactical officer Mev worked frantically to restart their defensive systems. "The counterattack has infected our main computer," Mev reported. "It's like nothing I've ever seen. Not just powerful, but adaptive." Military strategist Frentax, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. "Commander, we must consider that we have encountered a species with defensive capabilities far beyond our own." "That's impossible," Vexler said sharply. "Their ship design is primitive. Their propulsion systems are generations behind ours. And yet," Frentax replied calmly, "our ships are now disabled while theirs remains fully functional." A junior communications officer interrupted. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the alien vessel." "Put it through," Vexler ordered. Q. Main screen flickered to life, revealing Captain Wright's face. The alien looked surprisingly similar to the Caraxi, though with only 2 arms and no scales. Its skin was a pale color, with fur on the top of its head. "This is Captain Daniel Wright, of the United Earth ship Intrepid," the alien said. "What you're experiencing is an automated defensive response to your scan. It was not intended as an attack. Please respond if you can hear this message." Vexler stared at the screen, his 4 arms tightening into fists. "They disabled our ship with an automated defense? A mere reflex?" Frentax stepped closer. "Commander, I suggest caution. If this is their automated response, what might their deliberate attack look like?" As if answering his question, long-range sensors detected 3 Caraxi battle cruisers dropping out of faster-than-light travel nearby. The reinforcements Vexler had called for had arrived, and they were ready for war. The bridge of the USS Intrepid fell silent as three massive alien ships appeared on the main screen. Each was at least 4 times the size of the first vessel, with weapon ports clearly visible along their purple hulls. "Those are warships," Captain Wright said quietly. Lieutenant Commander Jack Howard, the tactical officer, nodded grimly, and they look ready to fight. Wright turned to Communications Officer Lisa Bennett. "Any response to our transmission?" "Nothing from the first ship, sir," Bennett replied. "And the new arrivals aren't responding to hails either." Science Officer Peter Ross worked frantically at his station. "Captain, I've been analyzing the data from our scans of their ship. There's something unusual about their biology." "This isn't the time for a science lesson, Ross," Wright said, his eyes fixed on the approaching warships. "It's relevant, sir," Ross insisted. "Their systems appear to use biological components, and their biology seems particularly sensitive to the specific frequencies our counterpulse uses." Wright turned to face him. "Are you saying we accidentally used their exact weakness against them?" "It appears so," Ross nodded. "It would explain why our defensive system affected them so severely." On the lead Quiraxi battlecruiser, Admiral Zorvan received Fleet Commander Vexler's report with growing anger. His scaled skin darkened to a deep purple, a sign of rage among his species. "So these humans attacked without provocation?" he asked. "The situation is complex," Vexler replied, his image flickering on the communication screen. "They claim it was an automated defense system." Military strategist Frentac stepped into view. "Admiral, we must consider the possibility that they are telling the truth. Our scan may have triggered a defensive protocol that perfectly targets our biological systems." Admiral Zorvan scoffed. "That seems unlikely." "Yet there is no denying its effectiveness," Frentac said carefully. "Their technology appears primitive in many ways, yet they disabled one of our vessels without firing a single energy weapon." The Admiral considered this. "What is the status of your ship?" "Main power is returning slowly," Vexler reported. "But our weapons and scanning systems remain offline." "Stand by," Zorvan ordered. "We will handle this threat." Back on the Intrepid, Captain Wright paced the bridge. "We need options, people," Chief Engineer Alan Fisher spoke up from his station. "Sir, I might be able to modify our communication signal to bypass whatever damage the counterpulse caused to their systems. It could help establish direct contact." "Do it," Wright ordered. Security Chief Karen Grant approached the captain. "Sir, we should consider that they might attempt to board us. If their weapons are similar to their scanning technology, our hull may provide better protection than expected." Wright nodded. "Prepare security teams at all potential entry points." Meanwhile, on the disabled Quiraxi vessel, Scout Leader Nixara led a small team to the shuttle bay. She was tall even for a Quiraxi, with silvery scales that marked her as a member of the elite infiltration corps. "The Admiral has ordered us to gather intelligence directly," she told her 4-member team. "Our small shuttle should avoid detection, while the battlecruisers distract the humans." Her team moved silently, preparing their stealth shuttle. All had trained for years for infiltration missions, but none had ever encountered humans before. "What do we know about their physiology?" asked Tev, her second in command. "Very little," Nixara admitted. "They appear to have only 2 arms and no scales. Their technology seems inconsistent, primitive in design but surprisingly effective." The shuttle's engines hummed quietly as they prepared to launch. Their mission was simple: enter the human vessel, gather information about their weapons and defensive capabilities, and return. With the battlecruisers drawing the humans' attention, they should be able to slip aboard unnoticed. On the Intrepid, Lieutenant Samantha Miller suddenly straightened at her sensor station. "Captain, I'm detecting a small energy signature launching from the disabled alien vessel." "Another attack?" Wright asked, moving to her station. Miller shook her head, studying the readings. "I don't think so. It's too small to be a weapon. More likely a shuttle or probe of some kind." "Track it," Wright ordered. "That's the problem, sir," Miller replied. "I've lost it. Whatever it is, it seems to have some kind of stealth technology." Wright's expression hardened. They're sending a boarding party. As if on cue, the three Kiraxi battlecruisers began moving into attack positions around the Intrepid. The real confrontation was about to begin. Captain Wright's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. All hands, battle stations. Possible boarding in progress. Security teams, prepare for intruders. Throughout the Intrepid, crew members raced to their assigned positions. Security personnel in blue uniforms grabbed weapon packs from wall stations. Lieutenant Commander Jack Howard organized the response teams, his face serious as he checked his own hand weapon. Teams of 3. Non-lethal response unless absolutely necessary, Howard instructed. Remember, this could still be resolved peacefully. In a rarely used maintenance corridor on Deck 7, a section of wall shimmered and distorted. The stealth shuttle from the Kiraxi vessel had attached itself to the hull without triggering the main alarms. Using advanced cutting tools, Nixara and her team created an entry point through the human ship's outer hull. Remember the mission, Nixara whispered to her team. Observe and record. No engagement unless necessary. The 5 Kiraxi infiltrators moved silently through the corridor, their scaled bodies blending with the shadows. Each carried small recording devices and defensive weapons. Their movements were fluid and practiced. They had trained for years for missions like this. Their technology is strange, observed Tev, examining a control panel they passed. It appears less advanced than ours, yet somehow more robust. Nixara nodded. Notice the redundant systems, multiple backup circuits. Their engineering prioritizes reliability over elegance. The team froze as footsteps approached. 2 human crew members walked past the junction ahead, talking quietly. The captain thinks it's just a misunderstanding, one human said. Tell that to the 3 warships surrounding us, the other replied. When the humans had passed, Nixara motioned her team forward. We need to find their command center or weapon control. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Lieutenant Samantha Miller continued scanning for the intruders. Captain, I'm detecting unusual movement on Deck 7. The life signs don't match human patterns. Right. Turned to Security Chief Karen Grant. Send Howard's team to investigate. Grant nodded and spoke into her communicator. Howard, possible intruders on Deck 7, Section C. In orbit around them, the 3 Kiraxi battlecruisers maintained their position, weapons charged but not firing. Admiral Zorvan watched the human ship with growing frustration. Why haven't they attempted to flee? He asked his bridge crew. They must know they're outmatched, his tactical officer replied. Perhaps they believe their defensive capabilities are sufficient against our weapons. The Admiral's scales darkened slightly. Or perhaps they have called for reinforcements. As if summoned by his words, a sensor operator called out. Admiral, long-range sensors detect multiple faster-than-light signatures approaching. Estimate 5 minutes until arrival. Zorvan's inner eyelids blinked rapidly. Identify. Unable to confirm, but energy signatures suggest they match the human vessel. The Admiral turned to his communications officer. Contact Fleet Command. Inform them we may have encountered a previously unknown species with significant military capability. Aboard the Intrepid, Captain Wright received equally concerning news. Sir, Communications Officer Lisa Bennett reported. I've managed to send an emergency signal to Earth Fleet Command. Admiral Gregory Duncan has responded. The USS Determination and 3 escort vessels are en route. ETA 5 minutes. Wright nodded grimly. Let's hope we can resolve this before they arrive. Continue hailing the alien vessels. On Deck 7, Lieutenant Commander Howard led his security team carefully through the corridors. Each member held a stunner, non-lethal, weapons designed to incapacitate without causing permanent harm. Life signs just ahead, whispered Security Officer Frank Harris, checking his scanner. Moving toward Junction 12B. Howard signaled his team to spread out. As they rounded the corner, they came face to face with the Kiraxi infiltration team. For a moment, both groups froze, studying each other. The humans saw tall, scaled beings with 4 arms and elongated heads. The Kiraxi saw smaller, soft-skinned creatures with only 2 arms but determined expressions. Nixara slowly raised her upper set of hands in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. Howard, recognizing the intent, lowered his weapon slightly. "We don't want to hurt you." The universal translator built into his communicator struggled with the unknown language, but something in his tone must have conveyed the meaning. The moment of potential understanding was shattered when an alarm blared throughout the ship. The Kiraxi battlecruisers had opened fire. The Intrepid shook violently as the first Kiraxi energy blast struck its shields. On the bridge, Captain Wright grabbed his chair for support. "Damage report," he called out. "Shields holding at 87%, Lieutenant Miller responded, her fingers flying over her console. "Their weapons are powerful, but our countermeasures are adapting." Wright's face hardened. "Return fire. Target their weapon systems only." The Intrepid's defense batteries activated, sending bright blue energy pulses toward the nearest Kiraxi battlecruiser. The alien ship's shields flared, but held. On Deck 7, the sudden attack had broken the standoff between Howard's security team and Nixara's infiltrators. The corridor tilted as another blast hit the ship, throwing both humans and aliens off balance. "We need to get them to the bridge," Howard said quickly to his team. He turned to the Kiraxi and pointed upward, then to himself. "Follow. Safe." Nixara hesitated, then made a quick decision. "We will go with them," she told her team in their own language. "This may be our only chance to understand what's happening." The mixed group moved through the corridors as the ship continued to shake under enemy fire. Crew members they passed stared in shock at the four-armed aliens but were too busy with emergency duties to intervene. On the Kiraxi command ship, Admiral Zorvan watched with surprise as the human vessel withstood their initial attack. "Their shields are much stronger than expected," his tactical officer reported, "and they're only targeting our weapons arrays, not our engines or command centers." "A tactical choice or a message?" Zorvan wondered aloud. His communications officer turned from her station. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the human ship." "Put it through," Zorvan ordered, his curiosity overcoming his caution. "Captain." Wright's image appeared on the screen. "This is Captain Daniel Wright of the USS Intrepid. We did not intend to attack your scout ship. What you experienced was an automated defense system triggered by your scan. I repeat, it was not a deliberate attack." Admiral Zorvan studied the human's face. "Yet you fire upon my battle cruisers." "Only after you fired first," Wright responded calmly. "And we're only targeting your weapons. We don't want to destroy your ships or harm your people." Before Zorvan could respond, the doors to the Intrepid's bridge slid open. Lieutenant Commander Howard led Nixara and her team onto the bridge, surrounded by security personnel. Wright turned in surprise. "Howard?" "Sir, we encountered the boarding party," Howard explained. "I thought it best to bring them here." Nixara stepped forward, her eyes taking in the bridge and the main screen showing Admiral Zorvan. She spoke rapidly in her own language to the Admiral. On the screen, Zorvan's scales changed color slightly. "You're unharmed, Scout Leader. Medical." Officer Olivia Martinez had been quietly working at a console. She approached Captain Wright. "Sir, I've been analyzing their language patterns. The universal translator is beginning to work." "May I?" Wright nodded and Martinez adjusted the communication system. "We can understand you now," Wright said to both Nixara and Admiral Zorvan. "Perhaps we can resolve this without further bloodshed." Nixara spoke, her words now translated by the ship's computer. "Their technology is different from ours, Admiral. Their defensive systems appear to be automated responses based on past conflicts. The counterpulse was not a deliberate attack." "Science." Officer Peter Ross stepped forward. "Captain, I've completed my analysis. Their biology makes them particularly vulnerable to the frequency our counterpulse uses. It's like accidentally finding someone's exact weakness on the first try." Wright turned back to the screen. "Admiral, we have no quarrel with your people. The counterpulse was designed to protect us from a different enemy. We didn't know it would affect your systems so severely." Admiral Zorvan was silent for a long moment. Then the sensors alerted everyone to new arrivals. "Sir," Lieutenant Miller called out, 4 Earth fleet ships have just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The USS Determination is hailing us. At the same moment, the Kyraxi sensors detected 3 more of their own battle cruisers arriving. The standoff had just become much more dangerous. The main screen on the Intrepid split to show both Admiral Zorvan and Admiral Gregory Duncan of Earth Fleet. Duncan was a tall man with gray hair and a serious expression that had earned him the nickname Granite Face among his crew. "Captain Wright, report," Duncan demanded, his eyes briefly moving to the alien standing on the bridge. "Admiral, we've made first contact with a species called the Kyraxi," Wright explained quickly. "There was a misunderstanding when their scan triggered our defensive counterpulse. We're attempting to resolve the situation peacefully." Duncan's eyes narrowed. "Yet they have warships surrounding you." "As do you, human," Admiral Zorvan interjected. Neither side appears willing to trust. Easily. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. 6 Kyraxi battlecruisers now faced off against 5 human warships, with the disabled scout vessel and the Intrepid caught in the middle. Captain Wright took a deep breath. "Admirals, with respect, we have an opportunity here. 2 advanced species, meeting for the first time. Do we want our first contact to end in bloodshed?" Nixara stepped forward. "If I may speak, Admiral." When Zorvan nodded, she continued, "I have observed the humans directly. Their technology is different from ours, but not inferior. They prioritize redundancy and defensive capabilities. The IO counterpulse that disabled our scout ship was an automated system, not a deliberate attack. Is this true?" Zorvan asked Wright. "Yes," Wright confirmed. "Our counterpulse was developed during a war with another species that used scans to disable our ships. It activates automatically when it detects certain types of invasive scans." Commander Maria Rodriguez spoke up. "Sir, if I may?" When Wright nodded, she turned to face the screen. "Admiral Zorvan, we've translated enough of your language now to share information directly. Would you be willing to receive a data packet explaining our defensive systems and how the counterpulse works?" There was a long pause as Zorvan considered this. Finally, he said, "Send your data. My science team will analyze it." Rodriguez nodded to Communications Officer Lisa Bennett, who transmitted the prepared information packet. On the Kyraxi command ship, military strategist Frentax reviewed the human data with growing interest. "Admiral, their explanation appears correct. The counterpulse is indeed an automated defense system. What's more, it was calibrated for a species with very different technology than ours." "Then why did it affect us so severely?" Zorvan asked. "Because our bio-neural interfaces operate on frequencies similar to their previous enemy," Frentax explained. "It was, as the humans might say, bad luck." Admiral Duncan watched the exchange with a cautious expression. "Captain Wright, are you confident in the Kyraxi's peaceful intentions?" Wright glanced at Nixara and her team, then back at the screen. "Admiral, I believe this was genuinely a misunderstanding. No one wanted this conflict." "I agree," Nixara said firmly. "Our mission was to explore and catalog new species, not to start a war." Admiral Zorvan's scales shifted to a calmer blue tone. "My science team confirms your data. The counterpulse was indeed triggered by our scan." He turned to someone off-screen. "Stand down, weapons. Maintain defensive posture only." Admiral Duncan waited a moment, then nodded. "Earth Fleet will match your stance. Weapons powered down, but shields remain up." The tension on the bridge eased slightly. Captain Wright turned to Tactical Officer Eric Johnson. "What's our weapons status?" "Sir," Johnson replied clearly, making sure the Kyraxi could hear. "We have plasma torpedoes, phase cannons, and our main particle beam array. Enough firepower to seriously damage several of their vessels if needed." Admiral Zorvan's expression changed subtly. "You are more heavily armed than your ship design suggests." Wright nodded. "We've learned to be prepared. The galaxy isn't always friendly." A hint of respect showed in Zorvan's eyes. "Perhaps we have more in common than first appeared." Admiral Duncan cleared his throat. "Captain Wright, I'm authorizing you to continue first contact protocols." The USS Determination will remain on station with the rest of the fleet standing by. As will my battle cruisers, Zorvan added. Nixara looked at Wright. Perhaps now, we can truly begin to communicate without weapons between us. Captain Wright smiled slightly. I believe that's the first step toward understanding any new species. For the first time since the encounter began, there was hope that it might end in peace rather than war. 2 days had passed since the tense standoff between the human and Caraxi fleets. The USS Intrepid had become the center of an impromptu diplomatic mission. Captain Wright had converted the ship's main conference room into a meeting space where representatives from both species could talk freely. Lieutenant Nicole Harper led the Human Cultural Exchange Team. She had a background in xenoanthropology and had studied 3 other alien species before. Still, the Caraxi fascinated her. She sat across from Scout Leader Nixara, who had volunteered to remain on the Intrepid as the primary Caraxi representative. Your ability to adapt is remarkable, Nixara said, watching Harper take notes with a stylus on a datapad. Most species we've encountered rely heavily on their technology, but humans seem to integrate technology with biological processes in a unique way. Harper smiled. We're stubborn. When technology fails, we find another way. In the ship's engineering section, Chief Engineer Alan Fisher worked alongside a Caraxi engineer named Krell. Together, they studied the counterpulse system that had caused so much trouble. It's actually quite elegant, Krell admitted, his hands moving deftly over the control panel. The pulse follows the scan beam like water flowing back through a pipe. Fisher nodded. We designed it after losing 3 ships to the Drax. They would scan our vessels, identify weaknesses, then target those specific areas. So you created a defense that uses the enemy's own technology against them, Krell said with admiration. Very clever. On the bridge, Captain Wright received regular updates from both crews. The atmosphere had changed from one of tension to genuine curiosity. Admiral Duncan had returned to Earth with 3 of the human ships, leaving only the USS Determination to maintain a presence. Similarly, Admiral Zorvan had recalled 4 of his battle cruisers, keeping 2 on station. Captain, Communications Officer Lisa Bennett called out. Admiral Zorvan is requesting to come aboard the Intrepid with his senior staff. Wright raised his eyebrows in surprise. That's a significant gesture of trust. Approve the request and prepare the main shuttle bay. In the mess hall, Lieutenant Commander Jack Howard sat with Nixara's second-in-command, Tev. What had begun as a security precaution, keeping an eye on the Caraxi visitors, had evolved into a genuine connection. So your species has explored over 200 star systems? Howard asked, impressed. Tev made a gesture with his lower arms that Howard had learned was similar to a human nod. The Caraxi have been spacefaring for nearly 500 of your Earth years, but we have rarely encountered species with your particular approach to defense. Howard laughed. You mean our tendency to overcomplicate things, I would call? A thoroughness, Tev replied. Your ships have more backup systems than any I've seen. 3 separate ways to achieve the same result, when most species design only one. That's because one system always fails when you need it most, Howard said with a smile. In the science lab, Peter Ross was having a similar conversation with a Caraxi scientist named Mira. She was younger than most of the Caraxi delegation, her scales still bright and iridescent. Your species developed defensive technology before offensive, Ross asked, surprised by what she had told him. It is our way, Mira explained. The Caraxi believe in understanding before engaging. Our scanning technology was developed to learn about potential threats without direct confrontation, which is why our counterpulse was so shocking, Ross said, understanding dawning on his face. You never expected a scan to be treated as an attack, just as you never expected to encounter a species whose biology would be so vulnerable to your defensive measure, Mira added. The shuttle bay doors opened to admit Admiral Zorvan's personal craft. Captain Wright stood with Commander Rodriguez and Security Chief Karen Grant as the Caraxi Admiral emerged with his staff. Zorvan approached Wright and extended his upper right arm in what he had learned was a human greeting gesture. Captain Wright, My government has reviewed all the information gathered during our encounter. Wright shook the offered hand carefully. And what has your government concluded, Admiral? Zorvan's scales shifted to a warm green color. That we have much to learn from each other. And perhaps, he glanced at the human crew members interacting with his own people, much to gain from peaceful cooperation. For the first time since the encounter began, Captain Wright allowed himself to feel true optimism. What had started as a near disaster was transforming into something unprecedented, a genuine alliance. 1 week after the first encounter between humans and the Caraxi, the USS Determination hosted a formal ceremony. The massive human dreadnought dwarfed the Intrepid, its hull gleaming under the light of a nearby star. Inside its grand meeting hall, representatives from both species gathered to witness a historic moment. Captain Daniel Wright stood next to Admiral Zorvan. Behind them, crew members from both fleets watched with interest. The initial fear and suspicion had given way to cautious friendship. Admiral Duncan stepped forward with a data pad. This non-aggression pact marks the beginning of cooperation. Between our peoples, he announced. May it lead to greater understanding and mutual benefit. Zorvan's scales shimmered with a formal pattern that indicated respect in Caraxi culture. From a mistake comes wisdom, he said, using a traditional phrase from his world. We approached you as potential enemies but leave as allies. The two leaders pressed their thumbs to the data pad, signing the agreement electronically. Applause erupted from the human crew, while the Caraxi made a rattling sound with their scales that served the same purpose. In a corner of the hall, Scout Leader Nixara stood with Lieutenant Commander Jack Howard, watching the ceremony. Would you have believed this outcome when you first boarded our ship? Howard asked with a smile. Nixara's upper arms made a gesture of amusement. I expected to gather intelligence on a potential threat. Instead, I found friends. She looked around at the mixed gathering. Your species surprises me, Howard. You are capable of such fierce defense, yet equally capable of genuine peace. We've had to be both to survive, Howard replied. The galaxy isn't always friendly. No, Nixara agreed. Which is why alliances matter. Her tone became more serious. There are threats in this region of space that neither of our species should face alone. Near the refreshment table, Chief Engineer Alan Fisher was demonstrating the concept of a handshake to a group of curious Caraxi engineers. It's an old human custom, he explained. It started as a way to show you weren't carrying a weapon. Practical, commented Krell, attempting the gesture with one of his 4 hands. Much like your engineering philosophy. Science Officer Peter Ross and his Caraxi counterpart Mira had set up a small display showing their first collaborative project, a new shield technology that combined human redundancy with Caraxi efficiency. Initial tests show a 30% improvement in energy consumption with no loss of protection, Ross explained to anyone who showed interest. It's just the beginning of what we can achieve together. Captain Wright found a quiet moment to speak with Admiral Duncan. Did you ever expect this outcome, sir? Duncan's usually stern face softened slightly. In 40 years of space exploration, I've learned to expect the unexpected, Wright. But this? He gestured to the mingling crews. This is why we venture into space in the first place. Across the room, Fleet Commander Vexilor approached Wright with a formal bow. Captain, I must offer a personal apology. It was my order to scan your vessel that triggered this entire situation. Wright smiled and shook his head. Commander, if you hadn't scanned us, our species might have met under less favorable circumstances later. Sometimes a small mistake prevents a larger one. As the ceremony concluded, both fleets prepared to depart on a joint mission to a nearby star system. On the bridge of the Intrepid, Captain Wright looked at his mixed crew of humans and Caraxi exchange officers. Communications, send a message to Earth Fleet Command, he ordered. The Intrepid and Caraxi vessel Swift Wind are departing on the first joint exploratory mission. We'll send regular updates. Lieutenant Bennett nodded. They've already responded. Sir, Admiral Duncan just sent a message wishing us success. Wright settled into his command chair. Lieutenant Miller, set course for the Proxima Centauri system. Let's see what else is out there waiting for us. As the Intrepid moved away from the gathering of ships, Nixara stood beside Howard at the tactical station. You know, she said quietly, in Kiraxi historical records, this will be known as the scan incident, when we learned that appearances can be deceiving. Howard smiled. And that sometimes scanning a human warship can lead to unexpected friendships. The stars stretched into lines as the joint fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, heading toward new discoveries, together.